Oh my goodness. Okay, am I on? Okay. I don't know if it's showing up on LinkedIn. Okay, it says I'm live. View on LinkedIn. Yes. Okay, this is strange because something is showing on LinkedIn. I'm gonna close that one. Okay, I think it's delayed on LinkedIn. I don't know, but I'm just gonna go with it. All right, so hi everyone. Hopefully you can hear me, see me. I am Dr. Vernita White. I call myself the Brilliant Life Strategist and Consultant, and I do that for two reasons. One, life strategist based on personal experience and things that I've worked through in personal growth, and as a former educator, well, I'm always an educator, but a former traditional educator from K-20, so K-12 and higher education, I realized that there are some parts of life that weren't technically taught. So I've learned to look at life holistically and apply strategic things to my life, both professionally and personally. And then as a consultant, that's part of that, all of those 15 plus years in the education system, both K-12 and higher ed, especially in leadership roles, helping schools and leaders reach their goals in STEM education, diversity, equity, inclusion, and pretty much generally, not general, but specific leadership strategies. All right, so what I want to talk about today on my first live on on LinkedIn, hopefully it is working. I keep going back and forth. All right. I keep going back and forth. And what I wanted to talk about was 10 things that, well, reaction to this video that I saw Matt Diavela, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, on YouTube. And he said 10 things that college doesn't teach us. And as a former college professor, it got me to thinking, like, should we be teaching those or should we not be teaching those? I don't know. Well, I do know, I'm going to give my reaction to it, but it's always been bothering me about when people say, oh, I didn't learn this in school, or I didn't learn this in college, or what's the point of going to college and things like that. Now, I have 5 degrees, and that's not to brag or anything, but it's just to let you know that I understand the whole conversation about, do I really need to go to college to be successful? And over the years, my viewpoint on that has changed. Well, it has evolved. You know, I never believed that everyone was meant to go to college. And then I didn't always believe that everyone needed to go to college right away, just depending on what you want to do in your life. However, in my household and the people that I grew up with, it was never a, you know what, let me do something else. Just in case something doesn't work out. I don't know who's that calling me. Okay, and then what I want to do here. Bear with me if you're watching me. This is kind of fun. kind of. I'm learning things.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, just in case, like, you know, I can't save this. I want to save it somehow, some way. Okay, let's pull it down some. All right, I'm back. I apologize because I'm trying to do all these different things, but it's fun. It's fun. But like I was saying, like it was never an option for me not to go to college. It was as soon as you graduate high school, ever since I was probably in elementary school, it was like you go to college, you go to college. And then once I got into high school, it was, well, you've always been great at mathematics and engineering and science. And this is before the whole STEM movement. It was engineering, science and technology, the EST program. And it was like, oh, you're good at this. You should go be a computer engineer. That's the way of the future. You're going to write your own ticket, blah, 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 blah. So I did that all through high school. Then I actually went into college in the College of Engineering, started right away and then hated it. But I did stick with mathematics, but I've always loved everything I've learned about computers and coding and all of that. But anyway, as I started to evolve and going down the path of having career, I will say that I've been blessed to actually use all of my degrees and actually work in my field. And yes, I was a teacher, and then I moved up and did a lot of things that way, and I ended up teaching in college and had all these different experiences. But I know now that I'm seeing that that's not always the case with most people. And then I had to deal with people telling me like, oh, you're wasting your gifts and talents as a teacher, knowing that you can make all this money, knowing your background, this, that, and the other. I won't get into that, but I could see where they were going. So as I became a college professor, I worked at a small liberal arts private school. So the tuition was up there. I think tuition was like 60 grand a year. And the students that I was working with, a lot of them went there to be classroom teachers. I'm not going to get into that. I'll say that for another video. But these are the things that, teaching in college, these are the things that Matt mentioned in his video. He's not the only one, but as I was just, it just kept coming to me, like, I am so sick of people saying this. But so let me say this, especially for K-12 schools, and some people may have their reaction to that. I believe, and actually it's not just my belief, it's I've studied the field of traditional education. I've studied this, been in it, lived it, and school systems are designed to do exactly what they're supposed to be doing, producing workers. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. I will say that the profession of education is way, way, way behind. I used to say that it's 20 to 30 years behind society, but it's actually, and I read this, and I've seen this in multiple places, it is actually like 75 years behind society, because there are new technologies and things that are happening literally every 20 or so minutes. Invention and things that are not quite out to society. So people who have the inside scoop on those things is even more advanced than the advanced technology we think we know. So I'm not going to get into the history of education, but when people are saying that I didn't learn this in school, or it should have been this and it should have been that, knowing that the traditional education system is lagging behind, it is doing what it's supposed to do to pump out factory workers. We don't have factory workers like we used to, and that's talking about K-12. And then when it comes to college, again, I've studied the history of colleges. It really wasn't designed to do what it's doing now. Colleges were for the wealthy white men sitting around thinking about ideas, philosophy, and then having these apprenticeships and things like that. I won't get into too much detail about that, but it has evolved, but it hasn't evolved quick enough to match what society needs. So, and there's a whole like system structure things in there. But anyway, to the fun part. So these are things that he said. He said, now he said, part of this, he says they should teach it. And then another part, he's like, well, not really. So he was just giving his thoughts. So one says basic personal finance. And people are saying, well, I should have learned this in school. That in K-12 and in higher ed. And I'm going to agree with that, because there are, and here's the thing. Sometimes people don't know what's available in the education system. And it bothers me, and this is why I need to use my voice more often in this area. I've like jumped to like, I'm working with personal development and coaching and things like that, which I love it. But then I also want to come back and give my opinion about the area I really, really know. But I didn't think people wanted to hear more about this, but hey, whatever. I had the thought, so let me share it. There are classes actually that teach personal finance. It's a whole curriculum in a K-12 system. And I know in the state where I am, it is available for every single school. Here's how I discovered it. The students who I think they passed Algebra 1, maybe geometry, but they didn't do well in like going to Algebra 2 or something like that. I've been so far removed, I can't remember exactly the sequence, but it was somewhere where they got I think you needed 3 or 4 years of mathematics to graduate. They wanted everybody to at least get up to Algebra 2, but there were just some students who weren't gonna make it. So it's this class, gosh, now I can't think of the name, but it was a financial class. It was considered like a basic liberal arts, but it wasn't liberal arts. It was actually personal finance. And here's the thing. If you want people to I'm just gonna say it. If the system is designed to produce factory workers, like here, get this job, do this task, don't question here, we're not gonna expand their minds to let them know everything that's available. This class was meant for the students who they thought weren't college material. And then people started realizing like, wait a minute, we're giving them like the true slogan of knowledge is power, which actually is applied knowledge that's power, but anyway. So a lot of schools started backing off that course. And there were teachers and administrators like taking that class and learning things. They're like, oh man, well, we can't let this keep getting out. Not saying they did on purpose, but it was kind of like happening like that. So that class is still available. Well, I've looked, it's on the documents, and you just got to know how to understand the code, but it's still around. And in schools that have actual buildings, if you go into the closet in the storage room, I guarantee that you'll find some of those resources and curriculums and things like that. So the thing with personal finances, it is available, but then it's like people willing to teach it. And I'm gonna say this, sometimes it's hard to teach. People are always focusing on what the students should know, My whole thing is it doesn't start with the students. Like, who do you think teaches the students? It's the adults and how they're trained. So the adults who are supposed to be the teachers and the leaders in the school systems, whether that's K-12 or higher ed, if they're not exposed to things, where do you think the knowledge is going to come from, right? So personal finances, I do believe that is a course. I mean, it is taught if you know how to look for it, but I do think it needs to be widely available. And it's not even talking about like stock market and things like that. Those things came up, but it was like basic stuff of how to manage money. The mathematics that we teach with the principles and compound interest and interest rates and the whole PERC formula and all of that, it just showed them how that made sense. Because we do teach it from a different angle. Like all of the classes talk about personal finances in some sort of way. You know, you read literature about finances in English class. You talk about some sort of money and things like that in social studies. If you had civics, you know, you talked about that. Mathematics at a certain level, money is always shown up, right? But it's the applied way that, you know, seem to be elusive, right? So I do agree. And then teaching college, these college students that have no clue. And a lot of them, because they were at this private school, they had to work. So it was like, it was a mess. So yes, I do think it needs to be taught, and it actually is taught. It just needs to be more explicit. And then he says, number 2, how to actually get a job. And that one, I didn't even really think about it because there were some things that I know me growing up, I just took for granted. Like I already knew certain things, but it wasn't that I already knew things. It was just things I was exposed to outside of school, like with churches and different organizations and things that they had available for us. And then even some of the clubs I participated in high school, it was just some things that were just, that's what we talked about. Even when I got to college, it was like we were involved on how to do that. So my experience is a little different from that because I actually knew how to do that. Now, beyond college and when it's time to shift and make this, shift careers and things like that, that's a different story. But I realized that they don't really know how to get a job unless you were the student that had to work in high school. There were people that have to work in high school for whatever reasons. They knew how to get a job, but then it was like how to get a career. And those can be two different things. And I think the conversation needs to be had now that the world is changing. It needs to be redefined. What does a job and a career actually looks like? One, because everyone's not going to college, but if they are going to college, I didn't know this until a few years ago. Well, more than a few years ago. There are people, especially at these, I'll say like at these high-end Ivy League type of schools, they don't go to school for jobs and careers because things are pretty set in place for a lot of them. It's for networking. So you understand the reason why people are going to college and then work on helping them find their pursuit in life that way. I don't want to say passions because sometimes that's something totally different. But helping students who go to the college route, helping them to identify what does life look like outside of going to all of these classes, because you're on a system and you've been on a system since you were little of this is what you do, this is what the expectations are, this is how you show up, you do this at this time, you do that at this time. College is a little more freedom, and then after that structure is removed, you're kind of like, wait a minute, especially if you don't go straight into a career like teaching was, they showed us what to do and then we went to go do it. Medical school, you go be a doctor, take these classes and you follow the path, but a lot of times it's out in the open. And if you don't get an internship or things like that, you're lost. But then what about the people who they go to college and they realize, I don't want to do any of this, but what are my alternatives other than just getting a job? And how do I pursue entrepreneurship or things like that? And I do think that needs to be more focused, not even just at the college level, but back that all the way up to the K-12 area. Then this kind of goes into what I said about entrepreneurship. It says how to never get a job. And now that I'm in this world of entrepreneurship, I like to call it being an infopreneur. I learned that from one of my coaches. I do get that, because with everything changing so quickly, and it's not that it's more so people being aware, because there were freelancers and people who worked for themselves decades ago, but it wasn't getting that much attention like it is now. Like entrepreneurship is like some kind of like, thing now, but everyone's not called to do that. And I do believe it is a calling to be an entrepreneur, whether it's forced or you jump into it. But what about if that's what you want to do? Like, I looked at all these careers, none of them fit me. How do I still be a functioning adult and, able to take care of myself and produce in the world without going the traditional route? And the people that I know that only know this are like in the business schools, or if you've got a really good creative study program that do the things in the arts, and you have someone who's really good at that, that's not just teaching the theory, but they have they're successful in their own right as a creative, and then they're probably coming to teach college because they want to share that real experience. But a lot of times that doesn't happen. So I do believe that conversation needs to be taught in college as well. Like, hey, you might be here, but let's figure out, if you don't want to get a job, what does that look like, and redefining what work really is. Again, I'm going to say back that up to K-12 as well, because students now, especially in elementary school, and they have access to so many things, and they can start making money now. Did y'all know? I think he's like maybe 8 now. I don't know, but it's a little kid on YouTube making like $20 million a year talking about some toys. You know, and it's like, are you serious? I didn't know any like that was possible. You know, I'm just really getting into this entrepreneurship world and seeing what's possible. So if you got a little kid that young making this kind of money, and not saying that that's the reason why you should go do that, but he may not ever, I mean, of course he's gonna grow up. He may not keep talking about toys, but how fascinating is that to know that he can have a career at such a young age without even knowing he would have to go to traditional work. So helping students understand like how not to get a job, I think that's cool. And then he says how to build healthy habits. The habits that are taught usually in school are like study habits. But I remember, and I started off in private school and then I went to public school, but I remember that we had to learn how to do like real habits, chores, routines, how to study. Of course, I mean, we teach that, but not to the depth, because you think you do, and then you start teaching college students, like you're not studying. But just, you know, focus, time management. I've learned those things when I was younger. And then being in a magnet program in high school, I also learned like certain other skills outside of that. When I was in middle school, we had home ec class still. We had all of those technical, classes still. So I've learned a lot of healthy habits for myself. Now, I'm not saying I always did them, but even when I went to college, I already knew how to keep some things going because one, it was taught at home. And that's another thing, like sometimes people think schools are supposed to be miracle workers and they're not. Like a lot of the things should be taught at home. And sometimes the reason why I get irritated, and this is another tangent, when people say, oh, I should have learned this in school. Yeah, but you also should have learned it at home or in your growing up environment if you were able to do so, or have another way. Like my mom and my grandparents did great things with my sister and I, but we also were involved in our church and activities. And then if my mom didn't even keep us at our actual church, she ventured out. And if there was like another church or another organization that had things she wanted us involved in, we did that. So my mom believed in the whole village thing to raise a child. So I'm not downing anyone if you didn't have that home experience. But sometimes it's like, wait, y'all want schools to do everything, and that's not what they were designed for. But anyway, so some of those habits do come from home. But then I do believe that there are certain things like some life habits that should be taught through K-12, and especially going into higher ed, or even K-12 and going into straight off into society, because people forget either you come out of K-12 or you come out of college, you've been structured for 12 plus years. Then all of a sudden you're thrown out there and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because everything has been structured for you. So you have to learn how to do that. Then he says, number 5, networking like a human. Yeah, I do believe networking should be taught, especially in colleges. I think it happens a little bit indirectly in K-12, where you have to collaborate, or especially if you were the students that was involved in organizations and, you know, running for things or trying to be involved in the things. And, you know, I do believe that's a natural, like what table am I going to sit at or what group of friends I'm going to be with. I think that's part of it. It's not called networking, but it's kind of what it is. But then in college, though, it's unless like now, people who are like in business schools, they do stuff like that. But for the most part, that's not happening. And I used to think networking was, I have to go to these mixers and talk to people. And I'm like a little socially awkward. Like, I'm an introvert. I don't like really talking to people. If I had to, I know how to make moves. But just being like, oh, I'm at this thing. What do you do? This is what I do. Tell me about yourself. I don't like that because I don't like small talk. But the way networking is like, this is how I provide value. Do you have value? We can exchange, and then let's keep it moving. I was never taught about network that way until I got outside of my career and then started in understanding like the coaching space and the business space and all of that. But I do believe networking should be taught early on, like what it means to offer value, something that you can do, something that you, a skill that you learn, something you're naturally born at doing. And then, excuse me, how to be a value of someone else and build a team and a mutual relationship and things like that. Because then it goes into a mindset of, well, certain people can only get deals and things or get breaks, you know, because I'm not in that circle. Well, you got to learn how to be in a circle. And not saying that you have to be in everybody's circle, but like in the business world, I think the saying is deals are made like on the golf course, and people only do business with people that they like. And I don't think that only relates to businesses. I think that's all opportunities, honestly. Like people only get opportunities because people like them. In traditional K-12, I remember we used to see people getting promoted as principals like all the time. And you're like, really? You don't even know probably how to spell principal. And I'm only saying that from experience because I know some people like, really? You really? But they were in those circles and somebody liked them and whoop, there it is, right? So it's not always about what you know. And I used to hate that because as a person that looks like me, Black, female, and we've always been taught, whether directly or indirectly, your work, you know, speaks for itself. Lies. That's not always true. That is not always true. And it's like sometimes the reason why not is a guy I have in my mind now, how he became a principal. It's like when everybody else was like working hard or doing this in the classroom, you know where he was? He was up at the other principal's office. He was always talking to the people that came to the schools. He was just very social and just being out there. And when it was time to do that, it was like, oh yeah, one, because he was always in their face. And two, he probably expressed, this is what I want to do. Not saying he was qualified, but hey, so the person that was, or the people that were qualified, they're back there grinding it out. And yeah, so I do believe they should match. I don't believe that you should just get by on character alone. I do believe that you need to have the skill set that you should have. But I also believe that you need to be likable too. You do need to be likable too. So your work doesn't always speak for itself. You have to speak for your work. And that's a form of networking. The other thing he says, how to create a life outside of work. That is true. And it's a tough one about whether or not it should be taught in colleges. Because again, when you think about what schools and colleges were designed to do, it wasn't designed to do that. However, since it's become a staple in society and looking at how the world operates, I do now see where it could fit in. And the only way that can happen is if the people who are teaching it understand that and have that perspective. So if you or your professor doesn't understand life outside of being a professor, and you have multiple professors that do that, where do you think you're gonna learn it? You know, now it's better because people just can go look on social media, whether that's YouTube, Instagram, whatever. They can go see like, oh, wait a minute, that's possible? I can do that? How do I do that? They're getting exposure that way, but before that, it was like that's all you knew, and you only modeled what you saw or what you've been taught. So I don't think that's like a class, like, hey, how to have a life outside of work. Maybe it can be, because I've looked at some college catalogs now, and it's like, you can get a degree in that? You really go to school for that? But I do think colleges are capitalizing on things that you can just learn at YouTube University or go get a coach something, but that's neither here nor there. But I do think it's something that can be, also, okay, example. I didn't understand all of that. And then like, when I was like, man, forget these people at this job, be me as a professor, I did start talking to my students like, well, what else do you like to do? What else makes you happy outside of these students or wanting to work all the time? What do you do for fun? because I had to start looking at myself, realizing that you only just go home and go to work. I mean, yes, I had some social life, but not nearly as I did before. And I had to bring that back in. So I think it can be taught indirectly, but the people who the students see the most, they have to embody that as well. And then it says how to cook nutritious, simple, nutritious meals. There is, honestly, in colleges, there, especially in cafeterias, so they really do try to teach the students to be healthy. So that is, they really do try. And I learned this when I was working, building this STEM camp with one of the deans at the institution, and really starting talking to cafeteria workers and understanding like it's a whole machine behind it. I'm not saying that they're always the best food, but the intention that they put behind what they put out to the students, it is actually try to be as healthy as possible, especially with all these different type ways of eating. They try to accommodate everyone. So I do know that for a fact that a lot of institutions, they really do focus on that. It's not, again, it's not being taught explicitly, but they do make conscious decisions. Now, whether students choose to do that or not, whether they choose to only eat pizza and hamburgers and drink sodas, that's really on the student, but that goes back to teaching them actual healthy habits and what that looks like. But I know for me, and the people that I went to school with, eating got a little, no. I ate a lot out because my family was like really big in cooking at home. And I was like, I want junk food. So I did experience the freshman 15 because I wanted to. Not saying, but salad, but then it was like, okay, get back on track. But salads and things were available, smoothies were available, like wholesome meals were available. So it's not explicitly taught, but it's there for the students to pay attention to. Now, going in the K-12 system, they did take out like home ec and different electives like that, that did focus on how to fend for yourself and teach yourself how to cook, like just the basics. And I do think that's unfortunate, because if you're someone that's going straight into the workforce or going straight into on your own, and nowadays there are a lot of students in like high school who are on their own, it's like, where are they being taught? I do believe that there needs to be some sort of, hey, some life skills happening at the K-12 level where you kind of funnel all the kids through. I believe that. And then that way, if they choose to go to college, because we're talking specifically about what colleges should teach you, they can be more aware of that. But again, a lot of this starts at home or in your community environment. So schools are not meant to be that way. But I do see where it could fit in, because if you understand that, then you can actually be a more productive person in life if you learn how to take care of your body. And then it says basic fitness advice. I do agree with that as well, because even in K-12, real PE was fun. Even when I was in the K-12 area, seeing how students performed and things after they run off some energy or was excited about PE and physical education, like actually being physical and not just the jocks or the sports or things like that, but kids who can actually go outside and play, it was a huge benefit. Colleges, I think it goes one of two ways, like people get super healthy or someone they go to colleges. A lot of people do, because it's like you get access to things. You got free gym memberships. You got these nutritional meals. You get to the campus itself, depending on what campus you went to. You got to walk everywhere. So I do see that, but then there are people who don't. Oh, and then you got access to healthcare. Well, I know I did when I was in school, and a lot of people I know that went to colleges, because it's in your tuition. You just got to know how to tap into it. So people do get, if you choose to tap into those resources are available in college. Again, it's not always explicit. They're just like, look, you're here, take advantage. And then that means pay attention to orientation. Not so much in K-12, but because they do PE a little weird now. I remember on my exit out of K-12, they were doing like PE online. And I'm not going to name the program because I don't know if it's still active, but I was like, PE online? just call it a health education class. Don't call it PE, because the P in PE is physical. So I don't know how you have virtual physical education. Something needs to change. And now that things are like with the pandemic at the time of this broadcast, I think we're on the tail end. Being remote and things like that, it has to look different. I have no solution for that, but I know that being physical as a child does help, especially as you enter into adulthood. And then he says self-awareness. This is huge for me. And this is why I ventured off and really started tapping into the personal development industry. And then now I'm going to come back and start connecting why personal development is really career development, and especially in the roles of being a leader. Self-awareness, it is huge. I'm not going to go too much into detail on here because I probably said this somewhere on my YouTube channel multiple times, and it's probably going to keep coming up again. My first oh my gosh moment as to the importance of self-awareness in college was when I was teaching college students and listening to what they were saying about the students who were out in the field. Because they were training to be classroom teachers, so they had to go into the schools. Now I'm saying in the fields, I need to change that language. Anyway, so when they would go out to the schools and they would report back, and I would ask them like real questions like, hey, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And I would listen to the conversations. And I realized like, oh my gosh, these kids have been living in a bubble all of their lives. For many of them, I was their first Black professor ever. And ever. And I started teaching college in 2016. I was their first Black professor ever. Even I made my exit in 2021, and I was still their some people's first Black professor ever. So they've been in this bubble all of their lives, and then we're asking them to go out and now be the adult in charge over shaping minds. And it's like, your mind isn't all the way shaped. So when I would hear them make these comments, and I'm teaching like mathematics and how to teach mathematics, because there's difference to doing mathematics to learn it and then mathematics to actually teach it. I was doing both in some other classes. I'm like, why am I teaching this? But whatever. And I was like, whoa, we got to do a timeout on the mathematics, because this doesn't matter. What you just said right there is a big issue. And then that led me into working in like deep diving into cultural responsiveness. And then realizing, because then at that time I was doing my own personal development work and really getting into it. Like I have always read like some form of self-help books and things like that, but really understanding what personal growth and limiting beliefs, and I mean, it's deep over there in personal growth land. I was bringing some of that to my students, because I was like, whoa, we got to check a lot of your belief systems and how you see yourself and how you're showing up and how you see other people. We got to check that. And that right there, I do believe, especially going into any field that requires you to interact with other humans. I think everyone should have some form of personal growth. Like you should want to grow yourself, like be a forever learner. But really and the thing is with traditional education and then the people that train, we say, oh, reflective practitioner, and we do inner work and we look at ourselves. No, we don't. No, that's not true. Like you look and reflect on your practices, but not internal work. And then that carries on into leadership. And then we wonder why we have problems that we do in the profession. Well, I'm saying y'all do, because I'm not in the profession anymore like that. Like I do consulting work from an angle, but in it, I'm not in it anymore. So I was like, wow, that definitely needs to be a whole course. And honestly, it needs to continue out through the profession. Like it would really help. And this is where character building, because character building used to be in schools. There are some schools that still have it. But I remember being in those classes where self-esteem classes and confidence classes. And then of course, like I said, my mom put us into different programs and things like that. But then I got some of that in high school because, you get into organizations, and then I was a cheerleader, and I was in a lot of academic clubs, and again, things at church, whatever, oration contest. Clearly, I didn't win because, but anyway, but things like that. And then when I got to college, it wasn't anything like direct, but it was always about me reflecting some kind of way because we had a really good teacher leadership program and the organization that was attached to it. But then like out there in adulthood in between, it wasn't there anymore. It was like, yeah, you're at church, and it's like, well, this is how I'm supposed to be, or, that's a whole nother issue right there. But there was really nothing to continue that self-growth and self-discovery and personal growth process until it was like, oh, wait, again, YouTube or something like that, to where you're exposed. But, and I had this conversation with a professor that was in counselor ed as well. She was like, oh yeah, we definitely make our people go through a series of things because we got to know what we're working with. And I do believe the same needs to happen in colleges, especially those people that are going to be interacting in charge of shaping lives of individuals. And if you're in a training and development industry and you haven't checked yourself, or you're not trying to do personal growth to become self-aware, then I think that's a problem as well. So I agree that can be taught. And again, it may not be, I think it should be an explicit class. I think it should run through through college. I think it should be levels to this, just like there are levels to the mathematics classes that you have to take. I think it should be levels to personal awareness and personal growth. But then I also think that the faculty members who are responsible should also have to go through that process as well. Because again, students will react or become what they keep being exposed to. All right. And then the last one, he says, colleges aren't meant to teach you everything. And I totally agree. Same thing with K-12. Like I go back because my experiences, and it's funny because sometimes I forget I block out the whole time I was in higher ed sometimes and jump back to K-12. But I did spend 5 years teaching at the university. And K-12 or colleges, they're not meant to teach everything. But here's the thing. What if they did shift in the way that they are preparing students for life? Because we're not going to say everyone needs to go to college. And sometimes everyone don't deserve some of that headache either. So I'll say that. But everyone's not going to college, and that's fine. But what are we really doing? And part of my struggle, because I put some things out there and contacted some people about doing consulting work, but I know deep down in my heart, the way I want to do my consulting work and I do want to use my background in STEM education and leadership as a way in, but I work with a consulting company now, and it's like, do I really want you to know how to teach math better? Like, honestly, you don't need a consultant to come tell your teachers how to teach math, because honestly, they need to go sign up for a math class or a science class, to get that knowledge, or they can just go to YouTube and get those basic skills of what it means. What needs to happen is, what does this look like in real life? Unless you are, and this is hard to pinpoint where a child is going to go until they make up their minds. I mean, I do believe in exposure and being, and that's another video, but I do believe in exposure being kind of strategic of how you set your child up. And then they can go make the decisions elsewhere. But for me, I was geared towards being something in STEM education. My mom and some of my mentors were like, oh, that's what she's good at? and things like that. And then I was able to make up my own mind, but it was kind of like, I think that's good parenting and mentoring. I wasn't forced. I did other things, but it was kind of like, but unless you know, like in a child, like, hey, I want to be a rocket scientist, or I want to build rockets, or whatever the case may be, and you know that they need a particular set of skills, That's where learning the mathematics and the science and the engineering, like as it is as a discipline. But then it's like, what are we doing with everyone else, like who wants to be in photography? I don't have all the solutions. I need to think through this, but if we truly want schools to shift and stop having the conversation of, oh, I should have learned this in school, then school is, there are people who teach and lead. So it's not like this mystical entity, like, oh, school has to be like this. It's not like the building makes the decision, right? There are people who make the decisions of what should be taught in schools. But then here's the other part to that. Let's say the structure doesn't change, but the people in the structure can change. So as an educator, and I know I did this for myself, what experiences do I really want my students to have? I need to go get those experiences myself and then bring them back to them so I can expose them. But if my experiences are only limited and I'm only focusing on this outdated curriculum, that's all I can give my students. But then I can go be upset. And it's like, oh, they're keeping me down, or they're not doing this, that, and the other. But then you're not speaking up. But I won't go there. So should things be taught in colleges in K-12? I do agree. How should they be taught? That's up for debate and conversation. Again, if you want schools to teach everything, and if you want to learn everything in schools, whether that's in K-12 or college, I'm going to say this. You probably did. Schools are not horrible if you honestly look at what is being taught. Now, the execution could be shaky, but if you think about the wide range of topics that are being taught in K-12, because some people I think they only focus on the narrow view of what is being taught. But if you look at the entire spectrum of curriculum, it's pretty vast. Not the best compared to, especially the United States. But if you think of what's available, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good, solid foundation. Again, the execution could be a little shaky. And then colleges, come on. There is a wide range of things available if you know how to access them. Now, again, the execution and the mindset of, hey, go to college, get a job, I think that's outdated, but what is available at the core essence of what's in college, I think it's pretty good. You do learn those things. Now, there's some ownership that has to happen. Did you remember? Did you pay attention? Did you utilize the resources? That's up for discussion and debate too. I've had to check myself, like, man, I should have learned that in school. And I'm like, I really don't say that too often. I really don't. Because one, I understand that's not what it was for. And then two, there were other ways that I got my education or my exposure and my experiences. So I've been on here for a minute. I hope it's showing up somewhere. I really do. This was my first live. Hopefully it'll be okay, whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna save this somewhere because I enjoyed having this conversation. But let me know your thoughts wherever you can comment somewhere. Let me know your thoughts about these 10 things. If there are other things that you wish you would have learned in college, or should you even need to learn them in college? And let's take it a step further and go back to K-12. So again, this video was by Matt Diavela. I hope I'm saying that right. He has like over 3 million subscribers on YouTube. He doesn't just talk about this. He talks about a lot of things, but this one caught my attention, especially because I've been in this. I'm so sick of people saying I should have learned this when. All right, so that's all I have for you. I am Dr. Vernita White. I go by the Brilliant Life Strategist and consultant because my objective is helping people break their personal glass ceiling so they can show up more powerfully in their lives and in their careers, because I do believe that your contribution can be made in your career if you show up to be more empowered and use your voice. All right, so I'm going to get off, figure out where this is going to be saved, and I will see you next time. So remember, I say this on my YouTube channel, and I'm probably going to post this if I can find it on there as well. But I want you to be well, be empowered, be bold, and be brilliant. Until next time, bye.